This story takes place over the course of a few years, but it kicks off around 2006. I was 15, and I was puttering around the stacks at the local library, trying to find books for a paper I was working on for my history class. I have no idea what the topic of my paper was, but I know I was looking for books about England. My mom is the super overprotective type, so she had walked me up to the third floor so I could browse the stacks and, after deciding that it was thoroughly devoid of sketchy creeps, she left me up there to go find some books for my sister in the kids section that was housed in the basement. I was having a blast. I didn't get left to my own devices very often, so I was reveling in the independent feeling of doing my own thing without my mom supervising. The stacks take up the entire third floor of the library. The stairs that lead to it come up from the back of the building, and the large rooms filled with rows and rows of bookshelves come off the left, right, and directly across from the stairs. I was in the room to the left. I was about 5 aisles back from the door to the atrium, and I was pretty confident in the fact that I was completely alone up there. There had been one guy at a table in the atrium when Mom had walked me up, but he had been packing his computer away when we came over the stairs, so I know he was long gone. After a few minutes of meandering down the aisles, I caught a flash at the end of the one I was in. It was a guy. He was tall looking. He stared down the aisle at me as he passed. He was wearing a blue jacket, faded jeans, a pair of dingy-looking white sneakers, glasses, and oddly enough, an unhooked bike helmet. That struck me as odd. Now, this made me a little nervous. I've always been a really anxious person, and while I grew up in a relatively small town, the crushing realization that I was 3 entire floors away from my mom hit me. I brushed it off, though, because really, what's so scary about some dude in a bike helmet walking by? Geez, I thought to myself, you're alone for 5 whole minutes and some dude walks by and you freak out? You're almost an adult. Grow up. So, I forgot about it. I went back to browsing for my book and pulling interesting-looking titles off the shelf to page through them. They were mostly reference books, dry, dull reading. I was crouched down another aisle back from the door to the atrium when I heard somebody clear their throat not far away. I looked up, and there he was. I was pretty close to one end of the aisle, and he was standing at the other end of it, arms limp at his sides, grinning at me. I smiled at him nervously and went back to looking for my book. "Hi," he said. He hadn't moved yet. I looked back up at him for a second and said, "Hi, back." Now, stranger danger is a real thing, kids, but my mom didn't raise me to be impolite. If somebody says hello to you, you say hello back. I got this weird feeling in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. But he wasn't doing anything but standing there smiling at me. "Looking for books?" he asked. I felt like that was pretty obvious, but I still looked back at him and nodded. "What kind of books are you looking for?" He took a step closer and tilted his head at the stack I had balanced on my crouched knees while I flipped through the pages of another. "Books for a paper." I remember thinking that short responses and disinterest would deter him. I was wrong. "What kind of paper?" he asked. He took another step. "About England," I said. I had stopped looking directly at him, but I was still keeping an eye on him in my peripheral vision. "I've never been there," he informed me. I wasn't sure why that mattered. Me either," I said. I stood up and ducked around the end of the aisle and into the adjacent one. He followed me, but maintained the distance. "Do you go to school around here?" He was leaning on the end of the aisle I had just entered. "Yup." I took a step away, and he took another step toward me. Looking back, I realized I should have just run right then, but I didn't. I needed that book, after all. I had a history paper due, and I needed 6 print sources. "Do you want to be my friend?" he asked. He was speaking softer now, and taking steps closer to me more frequently, slightly crouched. He wasn't that much taller than me. I've always been tall for my age, and I was pretty sure I could have pushed him if I needed to. He looked pretty frail, but I was internally freaking out. I hoped he couldn't see that. I have a lot of friends already, actually. He was nearly within arm's reach of me now, despite my backpedaling away from him. He stood back up and put his hands out to the side a little bit. "Can I have a hug?" he asked. I could tell that the look he had plastered on his face was one of mock innocence. No. I turned around and dashed for the end of the aisle I was in, but I didn't realize I'd gotten myself to turn around. It's a pretty easy thing to do up there. So instead of hurrying off into the atrium towards the stairs like I thought, I was actually heading deeper into the stacks. I knew there was a bathroom back there, so I ran into it. I locked the door of the stall, but didn't lock the bathroom door. Thankfully, he didn't follow me in there. I threw my stack of books into the corner of the stall and dug my cell phone out of my pocket. This was way before smartphones, or at least before I had one. It was a little Samsung thing with a green screen. No signal. Go figure. So, the way I saw it, I had two options. I could stay in the bathroom until the library closed, or until Helmet Guy elbowed his way in for that hug, or I could suck it up and make a run for it. I gathered up my books, splashed some water on my face, and tried to give myself a pep talk that sounded even halfway convincing. I tried not to remind myself that I had never run in my life. I even walked the required mile for gym class. I pulled the door open just enough to peek out with one eye. The coast appeared to be clear, but one of my books was slipping. I let go of my hold on the door, and it bumped closed. After fixing my book, I yanked the door, prepared to run, and there he was, grinning at me. What I had failed to notice as I ran into the bathroom was the reading nook tucked conveniently beside the door of the ladies' room. He had been waiting for me in a pretty comfortable, easy chair just out of sight. "Why did you go in there?" he asked. "I just want a hug." "Gotta go, sorry." I ran past him, praying to whatever god there might be that I didn't drop any of the books, or that somebody who wasn't trying to hug me was magically hanging out in the atrium at 9 at night. I got to the stairs while he ran after me, calling for me to wait. As I jumped over 2 steps to the first landing I encountered, I spotted a few people milling around on the second floor and immediately felt better. He was hot on my heels, but as soon as he noticed the people, he turned around and ran back up to the stacks. I finally found my mom, after running around every floor like a chicken with my head cut off. While I didn't immediately tell her what happened, she is my mom, so of course she knew something had happened. After the classic mom interrogation, she, totally horrified, all but dragged me by my ear to the librarian at the front desk. When Mom rounded on me to give a description of the guy to the librarian, the woman leaned over the counter with a concerned look on her face and asked me, "Honey, did he have a bike helmet on?" Apparently, my new friend was a pretty frequent flyer in the stacks, and pretty well known among library staff for his hug requests. It had gotten to the point that they would only send the male librarians to the stacks, because he avoided them like the plague. The librarians were used to it, and thought he was pretty harmless, and while they had had a few female patrons mention that he had requested a hug from them, he had never dared approach a minor, let alone an unaccompanied one, to ask for a hug. My report got him banned from the library for a year, and a call was put into the police. I distinctly remember feeling bad that I had gotten him banned. That didn't last long. I wish I could say that this was our only encounter. I wish I could say he'd only requested my friendship twice. I also wish I had only run into him 3 times. But, as I said, it's a pretty small town, so I had the pleasuring of running into the sketch-ass 4 times. The second time was 3 or 4 years later. I was in college. I had a totally different hair color and was taller. I was at the mall with my best friend. We sure were proud of ourselves in our new sundresses and thought we were hot shit. As we rounded the corner and headed to the food court, I spotted a blue bike helmet bobbing around in the sparse crowd. I grabbed my friend's elbow and hissed to her that the bicycle guy was here. She turned to me and smiled and said, "Don't worry, we'll handle it." Oh, we handled it. He was walking towards us, heading in the direction we'd just come from. when he laid eyes on me. There was that creepy grin again. He crouched his head down and started walking faster. As we passed each other, he reached a hand out to me, grinned wilder, and said, "Hello again, friend." I grabbed her arm and dragged her down the length of the mall to the other entrance. I wasn't going to be there if he was there, especially in a little sundress. I was scanning the lot as we walked to my car. I didn't know where he'd gone, but I didn't want to wait to find out. Turns out, I didn't have to wait. As I unlocked my car, I spotted him whipping around the far corner of the mall on his bike. He was pedaling as fast as he could. I yelled at my friend to get in my car. We ripped out of this space and I floored it toward the parking lot exit. He weaved his bike damn near right in front of my car, an anguished expression on his face, yelling at me. The third time was pretty tame in comparison. This was about 2 years after our second encounter, probably about 5 years after our first encounter. I was around 20 and I was working at the community theater in the city center. I was walking back from the other side of downtown after getting lunch, and I was listening to my iPod. Downtown is a pretty vanilla place, nothing much happens. People smile at you, and you always run into someone you meet, or at least know. So when the smiles I was getting turned into furrowed brows and glances cast behind me, I paused my music for a minute, and then I heard him. "Hello, friend." He was repeating it over and over. I turned to look over my shoulder, and there he was. That grin. That helmet. Just leisurely walking his bike up the sidewalk about 20 feet behind me. He waved. I felt my stomach fall into my feet. I have always been a lucky girl, though, so when I spotted my friend Ben walking down the street toward me, I knew I had an out. He hates men, remember? I ripped my earbuds out, shoved my iPod into my pocket, and flat out ran up the sidewalk at Ben. I jumped on him and hugged him and asked if he could walk me back to work. Ben and I worked together, and Bicycle Man loved to hang out downtown. So Ben knew what my malfunction was the minute I looked behind me. All I could see was Bicycle Man retreating on his bike. I didn't see him for a few years after that, but the last encounter was just as fortunate as the third. My friend Beth and I were at the park with her neighbor's dog, Meg. Meg was the best dog. Loved every living thing she ever encountered, wouldn't hurt a fly, let countless children fawn all over her, and roll around in the grass with her at the park, never barked once in the entire time I had known her. Beth and I had brought a blanket and were spread out half-heartedly playing cards under a tree, watching a group of guys our age play ultimate frisbee at the other end of the park. We'd been there most of the day, and I'd been there the day before, trying to soak up every last humid second of summer before classes start again. A couple hours later, Meg started looking uneasy. I reached over to pet her and she calmed down. 20 minutes or so after that, I noticed she had started growling. Not loudly, just that deep, low one that dogs do when they're a little on edge and want to warn you. I looked at Meg and then looked at Beth. Beth was staring over my shoulder with a blank look on her face. I knew what that meant. He was here. I heard him before I saw him, because I wasn't about to turn around and look. "Hi," he said, his classic opener. We didn't say anything, and the dog continued to growl. "Can you call off your dog?" he asked. Beth and Meg were staring at him, but he was obviously much more concerned about Meg. "No," Beth said. "I just want to be your friend," he said. He was staring daggers at the dog. I wasn't sure at that point which of us he was talking to. "That's not necessary," Beth said, looking back down to shuffle her cards. "Is she nice?" He inched closer, and the growling got louder. "Does she sound nice?" I asked. "No, I don't like her," he said, looking at Beth. "That's funny, because I have never heard her growl at anyone until you showed up," Beth said, angrily. "So she obviously doesn't like you either. Can you call out your dog? I just want a hug. Can I please be your friend?" he asked again. This time he was looking at me. "No, we don't want to be your friends," Beth yelled at him. He leaned down to Meg. speaking quietly but loud enough so he could hear. "Go get your new friend." And, because she was the best dog ever, she sprang up, puffed to twice her normal, enormous golden retriever size, and started barking her big, blonde block head off. He was on his bike and throwing gravel before I could reach over to grab her collar. I honestly think she would have ripped a piece out of his leg if he'd come any closer, and he totally knew it. Ask any woman my age that lived in town around that time, and ask them about Bicycle Man. They'll have a story for you. I knew one that got followed for hours. She wasn't lucky enough to run across a bend. He went locally viral on Facebook, a public post warning parents that lived near parks to watch out for the man with the blue bike helmet. Show the picture to your daughters. Make sure they know to keep away from him. If you spot him, send your husband out after him. Rumors circulated that he had moved from Massachusetts and was homeless on purpose, a child molester's trick to avoid having to register at a real address. Though it seemed that he preferred to request hugs from underage girls, he would follow most any accompanied woman, or small groups of just women, regardless of age, requesting hugs and becoming increasingly more aggressive about it as repeated requests were denied. Some of my friends lived by the park I was in with Beth, and Meg and Bicycle Man actually crashed one of the daughters' birthday parties. He just skulked around at the end of the driveway staring at the girls until one of the dads chased him off. I wonder if he was just a misunderstood man with some mental problems that had nobody to look out for him. But damn, Bicycle Man. Let's not meet again.